find her in the waiting room. Let's see here. And it's all right. Hi, everyone. Everybody's joining in. And so just one moment. We have our speaker that is going through some technical difficulties, Sandrine, but she should be here in just one moment. So, yeah, I think she's in the wrong platform, but she should be here soon. Oh, there she is. And so I'm going to go ahead. She's in our, I'm going to promote her to panelist, and she should be right in here, and we can get started.
Hello, hello.
Hey, there
Sorry,
you are.
I don't know what happened. I was connecting in all the wrong places. I was 20 minutes in a waiting room, and I was like, it's weird. They're not starting. Okay.
Connecting in all the wrong places. I think there's a song after that.
Probably.
Howard would know. Howard's our music expert here. So.
Oh, but I'm glad to be in finally.
Perfect. Well, we have a lot of our listeners here, and so we're going to get things kicked off here in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to bring up the introductory slides here, and I think everybody can see that. And then I'm going to kick off the multi-stream. So just give me 1 second, and we'll get that going. And I think we're all set. Perfect. Well, let's go ahead and get things kicked off here. So welcome everyone to the Rewards Mastermind. Here, of course, we're just talking to Sandrine, a very special guest and friend from the Emirates. And so it's so good to have you again, Sandrine. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And we're going to talk about the important topic of retaining key employees when you have limited budgets, because that's a big factor right now. A lot of companies are out there and they are dealing with the economy depending on where you are in the world. In the US, we just came out with inflation that was still above what our expectations at around that 6%, mid 6% level, which I know we had earlier was 8, and the rest of the world is probably laughing at us like, oh no, you guys have no problems. You should see our inflation. So, but anyway, it's still a big deal. But here at the, just really quick from housekeeping before we jump into the conversation. So here at the Rewards Mastermind, our objective here is to kind of elevate the overall profession of rewards, kind of be a place to where a lot of compensation professionals and founders of businesses can come together and we can just talk about some issues and see how we can up our game overall. So we do have our hosts here today. We have myself, Sam Reeve, and Howard Nisewitz, and Victoria Kisleva and Jackson Brockway. We're all from Comp Team, and it's a pleasure to bring this format to all of us so we can benefit from it. So let's go ahead and just dive in a little bit, Sandrine, on your background and so forth. For those people that don't know you on the call, can you tell a little bit about how you came into compensation and how this became your passion? I know that you were originally from France, is that correct?
Yes, I am. And I have a very French family name. There's this Majid Bardot actress who was super famous in the 60s. I'm not from her family, but I have the same name. So let me just take a little bit of the glory. Yeah, I started my career in compound band 30 years ago, actually, when it didn't even exist as a concept back in Europe. Nobody was teaching it. I studied HR. Nobody was teaching compensation and benefits. But my first job, I did job evaluations, salary negotiations with trade unions, all this kind of stuff. So that was just right into it. I did 20 years of career in corporate functions. I worked with Philips, and then I moved to France Télécom. At France Télécom, I had my first official title of responsable des rémunérations et avantages sociaux, which is compensation and benefits manager in French. And I was like, oh, that's a good title. It describes exactly what I'm doing. You know, it was the first time I was actually called it. And from there, I moved to my first international job for another telecoms company in Rome, in Italy, where I was doing South Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Then I got promoted, sent to London. They added Northern, Eastern, Central Europe. And then 9/11 happened. We were doing telecoms for the airline industry, not really a good time to be in the airline industry. So I lost the job. But the job market was good. So just like 2 months later, I joined Apple as their comp and ben manager for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. From there, I was poached by Microsoft, moved back to Italy for my second time. And then after Microsoft, I was hired by Fiat Group. So I moved back to Italy for my third time. It was a big failure for me, that position last position in Italy, because I had never worked for an Italian company in Italy. I had worked for multinationals in Italy, culturally very, very different, and I was not a good fit at all. So I resigned after 5 months, and I found another job. I moved to Dubai. So that was my first time I moved to Dubai as global head of performance and reward for a local company called Majid Al Futtaim, which is Emirati owned. It's a family owned business. And the whole world knows them because they have the mall with the ski slope in Dubai. So everybody has heard of that mall. That's not the only thing they have, but it's kind of like the thing that as a brand they're famous for on a global basis. And then the global crisis happened in 2008. By the time it cascaded to UAE, it was 2009. I lost the job again, went back to France for a few months, went back to UAE as global head of performance and reward for the sovereign wealth fund Mubadala. We had over 40, I don't even remember, 45,000 employees. I don't remember how many joint ventures in how many countries. I mean, it was massive. And then in March 2013, I left Mubadala, I resigned, and the next day I was setting up my company. And it's going to be 10 years. I'm celebrating 10 years of my business in April.
Congrats.
Thank you. Oh, lots of ups and lots of very deep downs as well in the past 10 years. It's been an adventure. I was, as far as I know, the first independent compensation and benefits consultants based in the region. There was one person already serving the region, but based out of Europe. And of course, all the big consultancies, but as a boutique, let's say boutique company, I was the first one. And I'm very glad to say that nowadays there are lots of other consultants that are doing freelance, that are setting up their own consultancy and so on. So I think that companies realize that there is a space for the smaller consultancies, which I think should be great news for everybody. And this is it, yes, 10 years later. And thank you for having me again. I always love coming here, so I'm very happy to be here tonight.
Always great fun, Sandrine, and in hearing about the extensive background that you have is just phenomenal. And we're thinking about what's going on today and the crisis that companies are facing. I mean, we've gone through a lot of crises in the past, right? So this is another flavor of what we've been dealing with in the past. So and by the way, to our listeners out there, I mean, if you want to, if you have a burning question or something that you feel like you want to add to the conversation, just go ahead and raise your hand, and we can bring you in as we're
yes.
If you feel comfortable. or you can also just use the chat and just put in your questions there. But back to you, Sandrine, and just thinking about what's going on across the world right now. There's, of course, we've been dealing with inflation. We've been dealing with a lot of things in turmoil in the world. And a lot of companies are really fearful of 2023. I've witnessed a lot of apprehension of, thinking about cost containment this year, and layoffs are happening in the technology industry and among other companies across the United States. And so the amount of dollars are restricted. And so what are you seeing in different parts of the globe? Is this happening in the Middle East as well? I mean, to what's the climate look like?
Of course, I think the caution is there, but I don't have a feeling that it's as bad and as dramatic in my part of the world as it is in the US. I recently read an article by a gentleman, I think his name is Ed Zitron, and I hope I'm pronouncing properly. Anyway, he's a little bit of, sometimes a bit cynical how he writes, but he was writing this article that he said that he felt that the CEO of Google should be fired. And he just took, and he was like, I'm just taking Google as an example, but basically all those big companies in the tech world, they hired like crazy, anticipating like a long-term growth. And then the first sign of maybe the wind is going to turn, because we're not even quite sure, we're not in a recession yet, they go like, let's reduce the headcount. And that kind of negates quite a lot of stuff. But he was also making an interesting comment that those layoffs were coming at a time where companies were starting to not feel comfortable, because employees were starting to have more power in the negotiations with the employers because of the Great Resignation, because I think with COVID, people are willing to make some sacrifices on certain aspects that maybe before they might not have been able to do. So like setting some boundaries, maybe they want to move to a different place, or maybe they want to get closer to their family. Maybe they are not going to accept certain things that they did accept before. And so apparently there's a lot of talk that the tech industry is, yeah, maybe they need to reduce the headcount, but how much of that is an incentive just for the shareholder with a very short-term type of feedback, type of incentive, so I would say. So in my part of the world, because we're still like the kind of old-fashioned and kind of driven by energy, right? We have our economy, which is very much linked to oil. And oil is not doing that bad at the moment, I have to say. I mean, it's very bad what's happening in Ukraine, but from an oil and gas point of view, the repercussions on where I live are actually pretty good. So the situation is not the same here. Everybody's like more focused on inflation rather than recession. Because we're still in a scenario where we see some growth projected, even if the growth is not like huge. Like when I arrived in Dubai 15 years ago, I mean, the growth was, the GDP growth was 8, 10, 12% per year. And coming from France, where at the time when we had 2.5%, everybody was like, woohoo, what a great year. You know, it was like mind-blowing to see this growth. So now we're like at 3%, 2.5%, 3.5%. People are like, and I'm like, it's actually not that bad. I mean, let's not complain. So I'm not sure that the whole world is thinking the same way. I think it's mostly a Western world type of situation. If you think about Europe, obviously, with Brexit, the British are like paying even worse some of the choices that they made a few years back. So their situation is very, very, very bad at the moment. But I feel that this fear of the recession is still very much Western centric at the moment. It's a slowing of economy in the rest of the world, not necessarily a fear of recession. Now, okay, the last 3 years have shown us maybe in 3 weeks, you know, there's like they're talking of avian flu at the moment and stuff like that. So you never know what might happen. But I don't feel it's the same degree of doom and gloom in terms of the atmosphere in the business world.
Yeah, so I think that's true. I mean, it's definitely in the US we love our drama, right? If it's if it doesn't exist, we'll create something. But but I do want to revisit the point where you made about layoffs, and I do feel like there was some irresponsibility and a lot of on some CEOs' parts as far as kind of treating things that like the past. I mean, there's less I guess exposure or critique among CEOs in the past as far as their layoffs has been concerned, but I think that is changing now. I think society is expecting CEOs to have more responsibility here. I think that it's layoffs are a sign of mismanagement. You know, it's just like I'd like to say it's just like nature. You know, when we have if you're managing a forest of trees and you're not ensuring those trees are healthy and or if they're overgrowing, you need to make sure that you're trimming back as you go, not letting the whole forest go sick and then cutting a whole bunch of them down so you can survive, right? So I think that it is a mismanagement piece. Now, the other thing that you mentioned as far as some of these big companies laying off people early, I think in some aspects they're kind of like the Titanic, where they have big engines and not a very good ability to steer quickly, so I think that's a part of the issue that they have there. But and that smaller company should be paying attention to when they see layoffs at larger companies, then they need to be more prudent and so forth. But I think those are also good points.
I want to say, I mean, of course, being based where I am, I look to the west, but I also look to the east because we're really right between the two. And so I do a lot of, I don't know what's the English for it, but I try to keep up with the news and everything on a almost daily basis. If you look to India, yes, there are a few companies that are doing layoffs, but there's still like announcement of this company is hiring 10,000 engineers, and this company is hiring 5,000 engineers, and this company is opening to women who are returning to the workplace after having their children and all this kind of stuff. So the prospect there is not the same. But also I read an article maybe last week from McKinsey saying that the companies that survive a recession are actually the ones that are preparing their talent during the time of crisis. So either hiring to prepare for the rebound, because there will be one, and upskilling and taking advantage of those slower times to upskill their employees so that the second the market turns, they're ready and don't have like that knee-jerk type of reaction. And I was thinking, yeah, that's actually pretty good. I remember reading another article, I'm not sure who wrote it, maybe Josh Bersin, but I'm not sure, talking about companies in some industries that had done that during the COVID crisis and ended up, having a much better situation once the lockdowns finished. So, I mean, it's difficult. I guess it's a case-by-case situation. But in my youth, when I started my jobs, I did a lot of layoffs. I did collective, so I did reductions in force. when I was with Philips, I organized plans to cut 5,000 jobs and so on at one of our factories. But at the same time, what we did is that we were rehiring other people who had different skills. And we did that not in a random way, like it seems like Elon Musk is doing at Twitter, like decimating entire teams and then rehiring the same people when it's been very messy. What we did was we were looking at people who were nearing the age of retirement and trying to bridge some gaps until pension eligibility. And we actually won congratulations from the trade unions, which I will tell you in France is not that easy to do. And we were rehiring other people. And I think nowadays, if a Microsoft wants to do layoffs in France or in Europe, but especially in France, I'm more knowledgeable. And if they say, hey, we need to cut 10,000 jobs, but the next day they say, hey, we're investing 10 billion, I don't think they should try to get rid of anybody in France, because that's just not going to be accepted by any judge, who are going to say, hey, you're making investments, you're making profits, what are you talking about? You're not in a situation where your variable of adjustment has to be the people. So find another way. And so I think that for me is the most difficult to understand. How do you continue to invest billions of dollars in one area and at the same time say, hey, we're too poor, we have to get rid of people, you know?
Yes.
The logic kind of escapes me, I have to say. And I regret to say that, because I've done a good chunk of my career in the tech world, and it's a fantastic world from a comp and ben point of view, very advanced, very innovative, and so on. But at the moment, it's like something is not right in the narrative, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's, I think there's a lot of people that share that perspective with you, Sandrine. Mm-hmm. But I do want to bring up one really interesting point that you just mentioned a few moments ago about how companies are preparing in these downturn times to be successful when things ramp up, because I think it's very aligned with our topic today, as far as how do we ensure that we engage people and continue to reward people, and when we have limited budgets. And so and one of those pieces is creating those development opportunities, you know, during these times, you know, to find ways to keep people engaged, using some of the new technologies that are coming out and so forth. What do you think about that?
I really agree. I think that the first reflex when you say retention, and I was delivering a training 2 weeks ago, and one of the sections was on retention, and all the students were like, Sandrine, how do I design a retention scheme, a mid-term retention scheme? And I was like, are you sure you need to design one? Have you tried other things as well? Have you really? And I think one of the things that companies tend to do is the first reaction is throw money at the problem, because it's kind of faster. You just need to ask a bunch of people in HR to find a solution. That's it. It doesn't mean that as a manager, or as a director, you need to make sure that your managers are going to get better at giving feedback to their employees, at talking about their career development, at liaising with the talent team to make sure that, you know, opportunities are there, at finding mentors, at identifying which online course might be relevant, all this kind of stuff, and who could you job shadow and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of the lazy solution in a way. I mean, I have nothing against designing retention schemes, mind you. I mean, companies pay me to do that, so I shouldn't say that, but that's not the only solution. You really have to look at it from a holistic point of view and from the whole employee value proposition. And I think especially when you have industries where you have shifting demographics and younger populations that are coming into the workforce, the aspects of the working conditions, whether it's the true hybrid or work from home or even work from anywhere, is going to exist. And even if the jobs are not possible to work from home, there are other ways to give flexibility. Sometimes, you know, it's like different shift hours, it's flexibility on the coming in time, the leaving time, it's maybe putting 5 days of work on a 4-day period so that the person has 3 days off, all this kind of stuff that a lot of companies are not so much willing to experiment with because it's more work from the manager side, but that would really help. And I'm thinking especially in industries like retail and hospitality, food and beverage, those industries that tend to struggle in recruiting at the moment and attracting candidates, in part because of pay, yes, but also in part because of the working hours and so on. And of course, you cannot solve everything. I mean, it's like for the nurses and the doctors and so on, there's a reality. But I think as well that you can have a little bit of flexibility. I read horror stories about hospitals that nurses say, hey, I'm getting married in 9 months, I need this week off. And then the day before they go like, hey, no, just go to the wedding ceremony and come back to work. You know, like, this is crazy. How you couldn't plan 9 months ahead. You couldn't plan for that person to be away for 1 week, you know. So there's a whole element of that I think companies need to look at, and not just look at, let me do something. And the other thing is to be really clear about who you want to retain and for what purpose. Because I don't believe in kind of blanket retention schemes. You have kind of like, you have the people that you want to retain because they're the young, high potential. You have the people you want to retain because they're working on a key project and you need them to be there for delivering on the milestones. And then you have the very rare case like due diligence and post-merger integration, where you need people to stay there for a certain period of time, which is a completely separate scenario. But sometimes you also need to implement things that are very short and sweet. So I don't know if you have 2 minutes for me to explain a real life situation from a few years back. So
Yes,
my
yes,
first job, my first job in Dubai. So I just said my employer was doing, among other things, one of its verticals was shopping malls. And there was a new mall that was going to open, which was going to be big competition for us. And this mall is called Dubai Mall. It's the largest mall in the world. And the company that was building it poached our head of shopping malls to become the boss of that shopping mall. So this guy knew all our salary structures and so on. And we were already the biggest and the best mall operator, definitely in the region, but also at the time we were often cited on a global basis. So there were a very specific type of position, which is in this customer service booth, where you have somebody who tells you the restroom is there, this shop is here, you turn left, you take elevator, second left, blah, blah. Okay. And in those booths at the time, we wanted to have Emiratis, UAE nationals, and it's very difficult to get them to do this kind of job because the families do not value them. And if they are ladies, you need to have the families to accept that their daughters are going to be in contact with so many foreigners and all this kind of stuff. So the gentleman who had left us started to poach all our customer service people who were on these jobs because they were going to open just in 4 months. So I was on vacation, thank God, in Dubai. And I have a call from my boss who says, Sandrine, can you come to the office, please, 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 urgently? We're having a crisis with the shopping malls. The new GM wants to just give 6 months of bonus to all the customer service people. I don't think it's the right thing to do. I need you to handle it. Okay, so by chance, I was in the same location. So I come upstairs. And eventually what we did is that for those people, what we did is we said, okay, what we have is a threat, which is immediate. They get paid a few hundred dirhams more, which is like really, we're talking 100 dirhams would be $20 to $25 per month. So we're not really talking a huge amount of money. But those people would jump for a small amount of money because for them, that's a big difference. So those people have this risk of leaving. Give them some money now to say, hey, we know that you're not going to earn more, so we give you a little bit of cash right now. And then we will give you, so we gave them 2 months of basic pay. And then we said, if you stay another 4 months, we will give you another 4 months of basic pay. So instead of giving 6 months of basic pay, which was the immediate solution, upfront, we said 2 to compensate for the immediate loss because you're not taking a higher paid job, and 4 months extra if you stay with us 4 months. Why? Because we knew that the opening date was on the 9th of September 2009. That was like globally known. And so if our people stayed, the 4 months was until October for us. So we knew that if they stayed until October, the other mall would have had to find their people. And so the threat was gone. So the retention scheme lasted for 4 months. It was for low paid, low educated types of jobs. It was fully cash paid and with an immediate payment and a slightly deferred. So that was very unique, very specific to that situation, and it was extremely successful. We still lost 1 or 2 people, but overall we didn't lose our people. So I think when we design those schemes, we really need to think of the specifics. What are we trying to achieve, and design something which is not necessarily a copy-paste from the so-called best practice that you can read in, I don't know, Harvard Business Review or some other type of magazine, because you really, really need to always have, I emphasize that when I teach, always best fit over best practice, always, always, always. So do what's right for your company. It doesn't matter if it's old-fashioned. It doesn't matter if nobody else is doing it. It doesn't matter if it's not like the best way, because what is the best practice? It means you're average. You're doing what everybody else is doing. So how do you differentiate yourself? And I think we shouldn't be afraid to differentiate, even though there's a lot of pressure for conformity through all these exercises that we all do in Competent for benchmarking, basically. So
I love that. Yeah, the concept of course, best practice is what the average company is doing. It's not really a competitive or strategic advantage for sure.
Yes.
But I also like the other thing you mentioned as far as when you're looking at providing a solution to a problem. I mean, what you did is you also looked at the competitive market, what was going on with your competitors, what were they doing, and how can you craft that internal practice to be most successful given your competitive environment. So very good.
Thank you. No, I honestly believe, and this employee segmentation is also something which I think is really, really important, that I think a lot of people don't do enough of. And to go sometimes, like, it's not, I don't really personally like the segmentation by generation. I don't think it's really valid. I think what really matters is stage of stages in the life cycle. When I started my career, I'm a pure Gen X. I mean, I'm right in the middle of Gen X. I'm almost 52 years old. When I started my career in the beginning, I was changing job every 18 months, 2 years. That's just normal. In the beginning, you're kind of figuring out what you like to do and the kind of environment that you're going to thrive in. And then once you find your way and you have more responsibilities, you need to stay longer because your projects are longer. You need to prove yourself. And in year 1, you're learning, and in year 2, you're improving things, and in year 3, you're fine-tuning, you know. So you stay longer on the same jobs, and it has to do more with the stages of your life, I think, rather than the generations themselves. But I think that we need to go also beyond that. I mean, it's not just like women versus men, or you know, Gen Z versus boomers, or this kind of stuff. I think it has to be much more segmented than that. Obviously, you can do that segmentation on bigger companies. In a smaller company, that might not be the case, but we have an additional factor in my part of the world, which is let's say what we call nationality, which is not really nationality. It's more like a a wide regional origin. So you're an Asian, and an Asian means Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, so subcontinental India, Indian continent. You would have the regional Arabs, who are the people who are not from the Gulf countries, but like the Egyptians, the Lebanese, and the Iraqis, and so on. You would have, of course, your Westerners. You would have what we call the nationals, who are the citizens of the 6 Gulf countries. And now we have Africans that are coming more. That has been a change. We didn't have Africans 15 years ago. And we have Filipinos as well, very strong contingent of Filipinos. Not many people from other Eastern Asian countries, but a lot of Filipinos, because a lot of them speak good English, so they can easily come to the Gulf countries. So we have that additional layer that we need to take into account. When I was in Europe, we never looked at nationality because we had a very small percentage of expats. They were all like either highly senior or like high potential, but typically those were the kind of people who were being sent abroad. While here in the Gulf, it's like 90% of the workforce is made of expats, and 10% of the workforce is made of locals. And that's on the national level, because when you're in the private sector, you actually don't have the nationals at the moment. That's why they're trying to put some what we call nationalization goals, or Emiratization, Saudization, Kuwaitization goals. So we have to take that into account. And I think this is one of the first things that Comp and Ben pros need to do, is to try to identify those clusters. And I would suggest using employee engagement survey results, decluster them, because traditionally you look at them by department, take out the department component, and try to see if you find clusters by other criteria where people tend to react the same way on some of the questions, because that could be like an idea for you to investigate what could be some kind of those populations that you can target in your communication. I think a lot of what we can do in terms of retention is not necessarily changing what we do, is changing how we communicate about what we do. So customizing our communication towards the different groups or segments of employees that we've identified, and changing how we talk about it. So at the moment, I'm a board member for a Saudi company, a family-owned company. They have a lot of different businesses in many countries, but they're struggling a little bit because what they do is that they have a very unique culture. And in this culture, one of the things that they're very proud is that they offer something which is akin to employment for life. It's not really employment for life, but there's like a very strong current of stability if you stay with this company. Unless you do something really terrible, or if the company is like crumbling down, you're going to keep your job. And I was telling them, you know, I mean, in the younger generations, that might be great if you have a population of 50-year-olds who are like, okay, I'm kind of safe until I retire. I'm not going to be fired because of my age. But for your younger generation, if you communicate like that to them, they're going to be like, boring. I want change, you know, I want experiences. I want to learn. I want to grow. So I said, for those employees, say, and see, because we offer this long employment, you can have so many multiple careers. Find the employees who have moved from engineering to finance, from marketing to HR or whatever, from one division of financial services to another division of healthcare to another division of whatever, and highlight those people and say, see, because you have the long-term employment with us, you can experiment and have different careers and different opportunities, and we offer a different environment. So it's the same concept, but how you sell it to the different audiences is going to be different. And that's very important. So I think we don't necessarily have to change everything that we do, but we need to really think how we communicate about it to make it attractive to our people, because people don't stay only for the money. If the only reason they stay is for the money, you don't have the right, you're not going to get the results that you really want out of your organization, especially if you come into trouble at some point, because people won't really care. So you want that engagement.
Sandrine, so for firms that are coming off a bad year and the current year doesn't look too rosy, so they have a limited budget for salary increases.
Yes.
What approach would you recommend that they take in terms of allocating those dollars?
Yes, so I would say that assuming that they were paying at the level that they were targeting before, so they are not behind on the market, they're paying more or less at the level that they wanted. I think I would emphasize short-term rewards for the higher performers and having a strong differentiation for those. You know, your Pareto rule of the 80-20, I think it's more 70-30 in the workplace, but like some of your top performers that really drive a big chunk of your business, to make them feel that they're still cared for. And I would also spend 1 or 2% of my payroll, if I have a limited budget, like let's say 1%, on a proper employee recognition scheme with a peer-to-peer aspect. Because one of the most impactful things that we can do for a relatively low sum of money is employee recognition. Has a huge impact on the employee engagement, on productivity. I remember reading some studies that were showing that the revenue per full-time employee was higher in companies that had peer-to-peer recognition schemes and so on. So that's money well spent.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be customized to each department and so on in quite an easy way. And even if you don't have money to pay for a fancy provider to have that on a mobile app and so on, you can still encourage managers to do something. And I would say to have spot rewards, even financial spot rewards, but within some control, but like not making it overly bureaucratic so that it can still go quick and for the managers to spend. That is usually very appreciated by employees and has a great return on your investment.
Yeah, I think those recognition programs can be very, very powerful. But I think one of the biggest problems that companies do in putting in recognition programs is they feel like that, if I just get this software platform and I implement it, then it'll fix all my problems.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, it still needs to be managed for sure. Yes.
Yes. And there is another thing which I think is undervalued by organizations. We talk a lot about well-being, and stress is a very important topic, and financial stress is a huge negative impact on workplace productivity and so on. And we, as organizations, don't do enough in terms of financial education. I'm not necessarily talking of giving loans to employees and so on, but like helping employees to think, finding platforms for them to reach out to financial counselors or financial advisors and so on. And the big thing at the moment is this kind of, I don't know the name for it in English, I can't remember, sorry. It's kind of pay as you go. So like if I've worked 1 week in my month, I can get one quarter of my pay today through this app or platform.
Yeah.
I like that. I'm not sure it's a permanent solution, but it's better than having to go to a loan shark, and paying a huge amount of interest to somebody and risking getting your knees hurt if you don't pay back.
Yeah.
So at least going through that is better. I'm not sure it's a solution to debt, but it's kind of still as a temporary stopgap, it's better. But so I think financial education is really something that companies can do for zero to very little cost, and that has a huge impact on employees as well. And the other impact that it has is that the employees feel that the employer is caring about them. And then in periods of uncertainty, and especially in economic uncertainty, it might help them to stay longer because they go like, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to get. I know what I'm leaving. I don't know what I'm going to get. So it might help to make somebody who was hesitant to leave to actually decide to stay with you because they're kind of worried that they wouldn't get a good environment or as good an environment where they would then go. So I think that would help.
Great. So Victoria, I would love to hear your perspective on, so I know when we think about sales compensation, and during these down years where selling may be a little bit more tough. I mean, of course, businesses think, oh, well, the sales plan is going to be self-regulating, but the one thing is that we need to make sure that we retain our top sales folks and that they have the ability to earn and so forth. So what is the best thing to do in these lean years to keep your salespeople engaged? And also, what about recognition as well? I'd love to hear your perspective there.
Yeah, I would say one of the most common trends that happens is reallocating resources on sales teams and the way that you measure folks. So if there isn't a whole lot of market opportunity because it's a slow year, and we saw a lot of this during COVID as well, sales folks tend to get measured on team performance instead of individual performance. And the measures are actually edited in one way or another. So it can be, of course, lowering the quotas themselves to try to make the best of the opportunity that you have, and then also re-gearing the measures towards more internal metrics rather than focusing on things like business development. So it's a good time to pick up at, maybe certain training programs that we wanted to put in place, that a company wanted to put in place, or something along those lines. But typically, like I said, you'll have team performance more often than not with slower years. So those are the primary things that I've seen.
And I think also spiffs can be a good thing because they're kind of temporary, and it's like a friendly competition. So you still are rewarding the best people, but and helping to maybe get rid of your old inventory and stuff like that. So that can also help to maintain the spirit. And sometimes people will just go in the spiff saying, hey, I know I'm not going to reach my quota this month. Maybe I can make it up through the making extra with the spiff. So that can be another way. Yeah, I agree. Changing the kind of metrics to be less to be focused maybe more on things also like quality and managing the relationship with the customer. It depends what you're selling. If you're selling cell phones to individuals, obviously you're not nurturing a relationship with that kind of client. But when you're in major accounts and things like that, that's maybe an opportunity to try and educate the client on the upcoming new technologies that are going to come, blah, 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 whatever it is. Yeah, that's a good comment.
Well, I know that, I just looked at the time and I realized that, boy, this conversation has really gone by quickly, and we just have a few more minutes. But Sandrine, in the remaining minutes that we have, I'd love to hear more about what you're doing right now and what you're planning for 2023. I know that last time we talked to you, had a lot of things on the to-do list.
I still do, but I'm very happy that I've had an ambition for the past few years to start pivoting my business towards online education more. I love to teach, and this year I'm very happy because I already have quite a number of engagements with training companies, and especially one in Singapore for whom I'm delivering a whole new series of 5 brand new master classes that I'm going to deliver twice with them this year. and which I'm planning to use as a springboard to work on those and then transform them into on-demand learning as well. So that would be the first thing. Also, as of the end of last year, I officially, when was that? September, I officially became a board member at one of my clients. So on the nomination and remuneration committee, first as an external advisor, then as a voting member. And I want to try and do a little bit more of that because I like the kind of interaction with the client and the strategic input that you can bring to the client in that kind of format. And there are not enough companies. I don't know how it is in the US, so I will caveat. In my part of the world, there are not enough companies that have not even just comp and ben, but even HR professionals that are board members. And when you say that a lot of the solutions of the future will be through people and through technology, they have lots of finance people, they have lots of tech people, or IT people, but they don't have HR people. And so I'm hoping that by becoming a little bit more visible in that space, it will encourage more HR people to try and get board positions, and especially ladies, because that's kind of an interesting one as well. I'm the only female on that board. And they didn't hire me because I was female. Oh, I hope it wasn't the reason that they hired me. I don't think it was.
You're brilliant, Sandrine.
But
it's for that brain you have, for sure.
Yeah, well, it's because I had already done some consulting work for them, so they knew that I wasn't too much. I was already knowledgeable about the company and so on. But more seriously, I think that's really something which I find interesting in terms of approach, and also of course continuing with the consulting. But I would really like to try and experiment on this new way of delivering training, and not necessarily on the classic, compensation 101 or compensation 102 type of training that other people are also delivering. Of course, I'm delivering that, but I'm trying to have topics that are really driven by current situations, by business, and by practical problems that my clients are encountering. And when I see like 2-3 clients that are having the same challenge, I'm like, oh, maybe there should be a one-day masterclass on that topic to teach people on how to deal with it, or how to think about it, or even how to be aware about it sometimes. Yes. Because lots of things kind of fall through the cracks. So that's what I'm hoping to do this year, and have a party for the 10 years of my business as well. That would be nice.
That's great. Perfect. Yes. So for those that are, I think that the micro learning approach is so important to have real on-time learning, and I'm looking into that as well. I definitely think it's a high value thing for people. So for our listeners out there that say, I want to learn more about Sandrine, I want to sign up for some of these classes, where should they go?
So at the moment, they are not yet ready, but you can still contact me. So either you reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm at linkedin.com/Sandrine Bardot. It's very simple. Or by email, I'm at Sandrine@Compensation Insider. And by the way, yes, I'm starting my blog again. That's the plan. I stopped the blog. I have stopped it for a long time. But I want to start it again because I finally have some fresh ideas of topics that I want to cover. So I'm planning to start again with the videos and the transcription of the text for those who prefer to read.
Perfect. Well, I'll definitely be logging in for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you so much again, Sandrine, for joining us here on the Rewards Mastermind. It's always a pleasure.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's been a very nice conversation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sandrine.
Well, I know it's getting late where you're at, so you have a nice evening. And
thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.